Jackson State has started two quarterbacks in 2 weeks, and they like both of them. So who's going to be the starter in week 3 versus Southern? Let's check it out. Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU, your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate GM. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Begin your coaching legacy today. We'll wrap up today's episode with a couple of sound bites from some head coaches. I'll be reading them, so I guess I really should say quotes, not necessarily sound bites, but a couple of quotes from some head coaches that I thought were really good for post-game pressers after a big win and a big loss. But we kick it off with a two-part about Jackson State. It really has been a while since we've opened up the show. We were supposed to do that last week, but things happened, and breaking news at 11 p.m. changes the plan. However, today we do that. Jackson State is at the top of the HBCU rankings for the first time this season. We'll look at that in segment 2. And in segment 1, I have a big question. Who's starting at quarterback for the Jackson State Tigers against the Southern Jaguars in week 3? It's the Boombox Classic. Is it going to be Cam McCoy? Is it going to be Jacobian Morgan? This is very interesting, and it's something that I really wanted to look at because I don't have a definite answer. I'll give you what I think is going to be the answer. I think they're going to do at the end of the segment, but Coach T.C. Taylor has yet to just definitively say this is who's going to start. Matter of fact, he said that we'll take the next couple of days of practice during the SWAC weekly presser, and we'll take those days to evaluate who's going to be our starter. Now, this is a different take on the whole two quarterback thing. And I know a lot of times we blast it, but it's kind of hard to blast it when you look the way Jackson State has looked. Jackson State has looked good with both quarterbacks. As I said in the opener, JSU has had two quarterbacks start in 2 games, and they like them both. Now, during the presser, TC Taylor was asked about the decision to start Cam McCoy against Lane College. Now, his answer was plain, it was simple, and it was very easy to read. He said, look, we wanted to get Cam more run during the ULM game, but it didn't happen. We will get back to that because that is a big part of my argument. But Coach Taylor said we wanted to get Cam McCoy a little bit more run in the ULM game. It didn't happen. So now we wanted to come back and get him some run in the Lane game. And he also said we're not sure who we're going to start in week 3. We're going to go through and we're going to evaluate. Okay, cool. Got you. Hear you loud and clear, Coach. But he was very, very adamant about the fact that they liked both. He never said that per se. Instead, he just continuously heaped praise on both players. I think he said they have 2 starting quarterbacks, and I think that's a direct quote, or it's a paraphrase, but it's definitely the sentiment that he gave out there. With this topic, I think it's such a big deal that even if we return to it on Friday, because remember, we do our game of the week, 6:30 Central Time in the PM every Friday, in the Jackson State versus Southern Boombox Classic will be our game of the week. So ride with me at 6:30 Central Time. But I do think that this quarterback question is big enough to answer today and answer on Friday, whether I have to take a different angle with it, whether some of the information has to come back up again. Maybe I'll look at the performance of each guy throughout the week. That's probably what I will do, actually. But here's the thing. You didn't really have an even playing field when it comes to competition levels. One guy played ULM, one guy played Lane College. One guy played up, one guy played down. I don't know. Like, of course, you can always do your evaluation, and there's coaches in the rooms who are supposed to sort out the strength of competition. Like, that's your job to sort that out. But it is a little bit more difficult, especially when you look at McCoy as a runner. I don't think he's running as well as he did against Lane against ULM. The lane should be tighter. The defensive lineman should be more disciplined. You would think that the rush would get there fast. You would think that just some of the moments that he was able to have, it would have been different. Maybe you have the same or similar results, but it definitely wouldn't have got there the same way. I do think that things would have changed, at least with his legs, right? Um, he ended up getting injured in that second game. I'm assuming he's okay. It probably was a small injury, and he could have came back in the game if it was closer. But they decided not to do that. It was a blowout, man. They won 58-7. So there was no need to come in there and risk that, in my opinion. But you have two guys ready, or excuse me, Coach Taylor said you have two guys ready because you never know what's going to happen. And though I do believe he's telling the truth, and I do agree with the sentiment, the way he's approaching it is not necessarily, I want to have two guys ready. It's approaching it like, we have two guys. Who's going to be our primary? Because if it's just in case, when you say you want to make sure you have two guys ready, if it's just in case, Jacobian Morgan starts game 2, and then you take Cam McCoy for the second half and allow him to play against Lane. If it's just in case, you allow him to just get in every now and then. Like, we talked to Trey Oliver before the season. He talked about how he developed Walker Harris. At no point was Walker Harris the starting quarterback, though they viewed him as a starting quarterback, right? So the dynamic is kind of similar. If you're looking at, follow me, let's try to make the parallel, because I don't think it's similar. I'm actually trying to make a connection on how it's different. But with Trey Oliver, Davius Richard was the guy. Walker Harris was the guy in waiting, and everybody understood that role. But Walker always got in. He saw various snaps. They wanted to make sure they got him experience. That's getting another guy ready. To me, saying that Cam McCoy is your starter against Lane College kind of feels like you want to see who's going to, and then coming in and saying you're not sure who is going to be the starter, that's not a just in case. I may have misread his statements, but that's what it sounded like. It sounded like having two guys ready sounds like a just in case. Everything he said afterwards, everything that I've seen feels like a quarterback competition to me, right? So, and that's okay. He explained the difference between Morgan and just like Morgan and McCoy and how they play and whatnot. But let's see, who do I think is going to be? Because enough of the stage setting, enough of the scene. Let's go ahead and get into it. Let's paint this picture. But I do think all of that was important. But you're looking at who is going to be. I'm leaning towards Jacobian Morgan, unless Cam McCoy just absolutely blew them away against Lane College. And he looked really good. He had 4 touchdowns and only played a half of football, 2 on the ground, 2 through the air. Jacobian Morgan played ULM. Obviously, he had worse stats, but he's playing ULM. That should be expected. So I don't think it should be held against him. But if McCoy blew them away, then McCoy's the starting quarterback. I think it's actually pretty easy in that. But the reason I say I'm leaning towards Morgan is Coach Taylor said we wanted to get him more time against ULM. Why didn't you? Because it was a close game and Morgan was playing good. You wanted to get McCoy more time against ULM. You didn't, because it was tight. And then when it was tight, you wanted to keep Morgan in the game. Morgan got the start. He clearly had the edge in the battle. No matter what, he had the edge in the battle. Then the game gets tight and it's like, okay, we got to abandon the idea of putting McCoy in because this game is still close and Morgan's not messing up. That tells me that he had the edge. I don't think he performed poorly enough to lose it. I think he performed well. I liked what he did against ULM. Let me not even say I don't think he performed poorly enough. I liked what he did in game 1. He came in game 2. It's really just a matter of, did Cam McCoy do enough to jump Jacobian Morgan? Jackson State does not know who they want to be their quarterback at the moment. They like Jacobian Morgan. They like Cam McCoy. I thought Morgan played well against an FBS opponent in week 1. So I do not believe that Morgan did enough to lose his job. The question then becomes, did Cam McCoy do enough to take the job? That's a different conversation. But Jackson State said they'll take the next couple of days of practice to evaluate who is going to be. But I'll be honest with you. I've seen 2 quarterback systems. It rarely looks good for both. Jackson State is in a rare spot where it looks like Cam McCoy can be a starting quarterback. Jacobian Morgan looks like he can be a starting quarterback, and you get to choose between two seemingly good options. That's not the life of most teams. That's not the life of most teams. Seriously, you got to understand. That's not the life of most teams who actually have a two quarterback system. That's out of necessity. This almost feels like you're choosing it. But yeah, let's push forward. Let's keep it in Jackson State, right? Let's keep it over there because JSU is now at the top of the HBCU rankings in NCAA, and I think that they've earned it. And the most impressive victory that they had this week didn't even happen in Jackson. It happened in Monroe, Louisiana, and I'll break that down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Now, here's my thing. If you're ready to start your coaching legacy, if you're ready to be the new TC Taylor, you're ready to be the new Buddy Pugh, you're ready to be the new Trey Oliver, then this is the game for you because you get to build your legacy from scratch. You get to genuinely be the guy, whether it is I'm going to go ahead and recruit this player, or I'm going to add this person to my staff, right? I'm going to hand out this scholarship. I'm going to go to this practice. Like I'm going to call this play. They have everything that you do as a coach: play calling, scholarship, recruiting, hiring, everything. It's all in there. And the beautiful part about it is that it's playable offline, right? I was in a place with bad Wi-Fi the other day, bad service the other day. You go ahead and take out your phone and you play this game and boom, it's easy. You don't have to worry about how, man, I got to connect, or I can play it at any single time on the plane, in a bad area. It does not matter. And you could do the same if you go to the Google Play Store or the App Store and download the game Ultimate College Football, or you can go to ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com to download the game today. Today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. And Gametime is the number one place for all of your tickets, right? I just went ahead and scored some tickets to a Saints game this year. Who that? You know what I'm saying? But look, I just scored some tickets. You already know I went to Gametime with it. And if you've never been on Gametime, you've never used it, download the app, Google Play, App Store. You can get them at both. Download the app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College with your first order. You'll get 20% off. It's simple, right? Who doesn't want to get that amount off every single time, or excuse me, not every single time, but your first time ordering? Doesn't matter if you went to a theater play, you want to go to a local concert, you want to go to a athletic event. They have everything. Concert, did I already say concert? I think I did. Comedy show, right? Like they have it all. Maybe you're just in a new place. You want to say, I'm in Chicago. What's there to do here tonight? Let's go on Gametime. Let's find it out and let's do it. Just go ahead and go to Gametime, download the app, create an account, use the code Locked On College, get 20% off your first offer. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Saints. We rolling. My boy Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson NOLA. You already know what it is, man. That's my mentor, good friend of mine, and a great host on the show. You know what I'm saying? Top 5. Definitely top 5. I ain't got to listen to everybody to know that. But anyway. Nah, for real. That's my guy. Anyway, Jackson State. It was just stupid. Why do I say I don't have to listen to everybody to know that? But it's a fact. It's a fact. You listen to it one time, you're like, I don't need to hear everybody else. But let's move on to Jackson State. I was trying to do a little pun. I was trying to do a little play on words with the top 5 list that we're about to go into. But Jackson State is back at the top of these rankings. I don't believe that they've been here at all. They subtly moved up. They were at 3, and then they moved up to 2. Now they're at 1. I don't know if Jackson State was at the top of the list at all last year. Definitely not in the back half, but this was a regular occurrence. It used to be Jackson State running the list. I remember when I first started doing this show, Jackson State was at the top of the list so much I wouldn't even talk about them being there. It was a non-story. I don't even know if I would state them. I'll just be like the usual. You can go into the barbershop, you're like, you just sit in the chair. You ain't got to say nothing. You just sit in the chair. That's what it used to be like. It's like, Jackson State's number 1. All right, 2, 3, 4, 5 is so and so. That's what it was. We'll see if they're able to have the same stranglehold that they had a couple of years on this number 1 spot. But Jackson State knocked off Lane 58-7 this week. 58-7, a 51-point victory. But you know what? I know it's D2, but you're supposed to dominate. And that's what they did. At the end of the day, you can't knock a team for doing what they're supposed to do. All the conversations that I have about this, that, and the third are irrelevant. Once the game is played, what did you do? There's a reason that I'm looking at Southern and I'm not overly excited because of how they performed against Savannah State. It's not about getting the victory. And they won by like 30-something points, right? Like it was a convincing victory. It was a comfortable victory. But I couldn't necessarily say I walked away feeling amazing. I can't say that. Can't say that. With Jackson State, they dominated from start to finish. They were who they were. They were a team that took over in the trenches. They were a team that was dominant on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. They beat them by 51 points. I mean, it was a guaranteed score anytime they touched the ball. That's what it felt like. And that's what it should feel like if you were a top upper echelon team. So I would say their domination of lane, it doesn't prove they are, but it definitely keeps it consistent with the thought of what they've shown throughout the first 2 weeks of the season. They looked really good in ULM. And speaking of Louisiana Monroe, I would argue that the biggest victory for Jackson State this week, and as far as the court of public opinion, wasn't even in Jackson, Mississippi. It wasn't even what they did to Lane College. It was out there in Monroe, Louisiana, because ULM, Jackson State's week 1 opponent, went ahead and faced UAB, a fellow FBS team. And they beat UAB worse than they actually beat Jackson State. And I think that always makes things look better. Right? So let's look at this. ULM defeated UAB 32-6. They beat Jackson State 30-14. So first off, JSU allowed them to score less points, and they also scored more than UAB. Who knows what happens? Like there's so many connected tissues here. I could go point to how UAB looked against Alcorn. I could point out Jackson State versus UAB and have that conversation. I could do Jackson State versus Alcorn. What does this say about these teams? But we all know just because A beat B and B beat C does not mean, A beat B and B beat C does not mean that A can beat C. It doesn't always work that way. So I'm not going to even go down that rabbit hole. But what I will say is when you face an FBS team and they end up looking better the following week, you look better too. You like collateral benefit. I don't know if collateral benefit is a thing. I've only heard it with damage. But like, you are collateral benefit. If you face ULM and ULM has a quote-unquote worse game, because they still won by 16 or whatever, but that was a tight matchup. That was a really good game down to the wire. ULM ends up beating UAB better. They end up keeping UAB off the board. They end up scoring more points against UAB. You now, in turn, your performance looks even better because we saw what they did to somebody who was on their level, on their subdivision. I think that's the biggest win for them this offseason, in my opinion. It genuinely is. And I'll tell you what benefits Jackson State in these rankings is that they haven't faced an FCS opponent. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful or anything. I'm not saying that they would lose. But as far as evaluating them, the people who are evaluating them against, they have. We're evaluating them against an Alabama State, against a FAMU, against a North Carolina Central. That's who we're looking at, right? They haven't done that. So when FAMU gets ran up and down by Norfolk State, ran up and down by South Carolina State, I can say, oh, they might not. That run defense is something to worry about. But when ULM, they had a pretty good running day against Jackson State as well. But it's an FBS opponent. So now the question becomes, okay, if they come down to the FBS or FCS, what do they do against those opponents? And I don't think Southern is a good example. I'm going to get that out the way right now. I don't think that Southern is a great example of how good Jackson State's run defense is or is not. Because they ain't been able to run the ball that well. I didn't think they ran the ball that well against Savannah State in the beginning of the game. So I have concerns about their running game, period. So maybe when you get to Grambling, because Grambling has a lot of belief in their running backs, then maybe we can have a conversation about how good that this is on the FCS level. But I do think that kind of benefits them because it's the benefit of the unknown. You don't know how good Jackson State is. You don't know what flaws could be taken advantage of on the FCS level. They have a flaw. Everybody has a flaw. It should be interesting to see if anybody can take advantage of it. They don't have a glaring flaw like FAMU does. or that Alabama State does. I still don't think that North Carolina Central has a glaring flaw, to be honest. I know that Elon beat them up pretty good, but I don't know if they got a glaring flaw that can be taken advantage of by a Jackson State or a FAMU who complete the top three. I don't know that. I don't. But it happened against an FCS opponent, and I was held against them. Overall, the real movement here came in the form of drops. North Carolina Central dropped from 1 to 3. So now JSU rose and FAMU rose 2. So now FAMU is 2, Jackson State is 1, Central is 3. The top 5 stays the same from there. Bama State, Tennessee State in that order. Howard, who was 6, they dropped down to 9. So now you have Morgan State and Texas Southern. They rise 1 spot because now they go from 8 and 7 to 7 and 6. Who was 8? Somebody else rose to 8. Whoever was at 9 rose to 8 too. So the biggest movement in here was from drops, not necessarily rises. Now, as we push forward, I want to continue looking. I want to look at a couple of answers that coaches gave after a big time victory and after a big time loss to really look at the mindset of a coaches. And I like both of them by Chris Dishman and Mickey Joseph. We'll look at that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, when I'm looking at FanDuel, I'm looking at the NFL because we're here. No more futures. You can still bet on who's going to be the MVP, who's going to be offensive, defensive player of the year, rookie of the year. You can get all of those things in. But what I'm looking at, all right, what's going to happen in week 2? We saw what happened with the Bengals, or we saw what happened with the Bears. Are the Bears going to get it together? Are the Titans going to get it together? The Bears got it. Bears didn't really get it together, but they still lost, right? I mean, but still won. So it's up to you. You go ahead and go on FanDuel. Put down some money on Caleb Williams total yards. You want to look at Jaden Daniels, right? We're talking about rookie quarterbacks. You're talking about some more experienced guys. What about somebody like Joe Burrow, who he hasn't been good to start the year for most of his career? He usually heats up. But Lamar Jackson, he's on fire. Who are you going to pick? Go ahead and go to FanDuel.com right now. And if you do that, you get 3 weeks free of NFL Sunday Ticket via YouTube or YouTube TV. So go to FanDuel.com/locked on to make every moment more. As wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Mickey Joseph and Chris Dishman has some very interesting words after a Joseph victory and a Dishman loss. So let's look at what Joseph said. He said, I thought we played good for maybe 20 minutes out of 60. I thought we were clean for 20 minutes. The other 40, we were bad. We had 16 penalties for 166 yards. That's terrible. We can't revert back to foolishness. And that's what we reverted back to. I got to do a better job as a head coach, and I will. My assistants got to do a better job, and we'll clean that up. This comes after a 37-20 victory over Tuskegee, right? But the thing is, they didn't score in the second half. And I like the attitude of it's not enough. And I don't think it's performative because 16 penalties for 166 yards is egregious. Like, that's bad, right? But he came into the press conference, the weekly press conference. What was it? Today or Monday? It was Monday. And he talked about how to fix this. He said, we got to cut penalties. Young guys have to perform better. When we put young guys into the game, they have to continue our standard. If they don't, then we won't put young guys into the game. And we'll see them in the spring. Maybe. That spring maybe was a direct quote. Basically, you got to get it together. And then you also got to finish strong because he's just not happy with scoring 37 points in the first half and then going away in the second. It's not going to work for him. And I like that. I like the idea that we won, and it's his first game. He easily could have been happy. He's never won a game for Grambling. This is only his second game. Let me not say it that way. I'm trying to get more aware of how I say things and how they come off, guys. So bear with me. Not my strongest because I just be talking. I be talking with my heart, and I know where my heart at, but sometimes it sound away. But Mickey Joseph wins his first game as the head coach of Grambling State. And he doesn't sit here and celebrate, like it's great. I'm sure he's happy about it. He expressed gratitude for him to be able to win that. And he expressed happiness. But then he said, look, man, I think he even reduced it from 20 minutes to 15 minutes in the SWAC weekly presser. So I like that, man. And cutting penalties should be a big deal because if you're undisciplined, which they were last year, it was bad last year. If they continue to be undisciplined, you're not going to win big games. You may win some games in the SWAC against lower level competition, but you're not going to beat the best teams. You're not going to compete for a SWAC West championship. You're not going to be in Atlanta. You're not going to be in a SWAC championship game, and you may lose the Bayou Classic. I don't think Grambling wants to fall victim to any of those things that I just named. Now, you look at Chris Dishman at Texas Southern, and they got smacked by Rice. It was bad. Expected, but not by him. Right? Expected by me. Expected by most. But not by him, not at least the way he was talking. He said, we can't allow the outside voices. I think our guys got pat on the back too many times. I guess we were doing too many interviews, and we're going to this talk show, going to this podcast, telling them how great they are. And it's on me. It's on me as a coach. I got to learn to keep our guys focused and disciplined and not worry about interviews and everything like that. Right now, we got to shut everything down and get back to the drawing board and grind. I love that mentality, Coach Dishman. I do. Because quite frankly, I don't know if interviews are the reason that you lost. I know it's not the reason you lost to Rice. Is it the reason you lost to Rice the way you did? I don't know, maybe. But were they feeling themselves? I don't know, maybe. Right? Sometimes you need a game like this. You get smacked. If that's what was happening, Rice was the perfect second opponent because you got smacked. And you needed that. In a game that means nothing, you needed to go ahead and get smacked so everybody understands, all right, we need that same focus when we play who they open up the season against, SWAC season against. I think it's Jackson State. Is it JSU? I think he said that, but I don't believe that. That's not what I remember. Neither here nor there. But whenever you open a SWAC play, you can't be full of yourself. You can't be like, I beat PV. You can't be like, I beat the second team that was the second ranked team in the SWAC West. You can't do that. You got to have the same mentality that you had in game one. And that's that nobody thinks that TSU is going to be worth $1. So we got to go out there and prove it every single week. That's got to be the attention. That's got to be the intention. That's got to be the attention to detail that you apply every single week in practice. And I think that Coach Dishman's quote exemplifies that. You could easily come. I see multiple coaches after games like this. Hey, man, we healthy. Came out healthy. You know what I'm saying? On the next week. That's all it is. For him, he's approaching this like this was a game that it was close. Pre-game. This was a close game pre-game. But he approaches it like it was. And that's something that I genuinely appreciate. And I think it's something that's going to go a long way with the mentality in there. Because you're not supposed to lose to Rice the way that they lost to Rice in Dishman's mind. And if you approach it like that, it's a different attitude. And there should be a heart. And you have a week off. Then you go to, I think, Lamar. So it's a different attitude. It's a different approach. And it's something that I wasn't on the inside with the last regime. But I don't feel like I saw this at Texas Southern before. I don't feel like this was the vibe that I got. So Dishman is a very calm person visually. He's very stoic visually. But you can see the attitude here, and I like it. Now, on tomorrow's episode, we back. I can't remember what we're going to talk about tomorrow. I think we may talk about Howard in that close game to Mercyhurst. So that may be what we look at, but we're definitely going to look at the games that aren't the game of the week that you need to watch going into week 3. So in the meantime, in between time, till next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.